Hello everybody and welcome to today's Friday Live, 25th of April 2025. So today the challenge is, as it often is these days, simplification. So we've got what looks like a horrendously complicated cup with an evil pattern on it, enough to make painters shake in their boots and drop their brushes and run away. So the job that we've got today for this painting, the job that I've set myself and I'm hopefully going to demonstrate to you, is how to simplify all of that complexity down and create an impression of light and shadow and form of the cup coming out of the shadow, without actually trying to paint an exact copy of the pattern, because that would take me rather a long time. So I'm just going to attempt to create an impression of the pattern, but to really get the solidity of the cup across. Okay, so I would approach something like this by looking at the cup as if it has two main colors. There's the actual body of the cup itself, which is kind of just off-white. It's quite an old antique cup that I just grabbed yesterday from an antiques emporium in Stroud. So we need to get the light and the shadow right on that white body of the cup. Even though you can't see very much of it, it seems like you can't, it's actually present right across the body of the cup. So it's really, really important to nail those values. And if we do, we will create the impression of light and shadow and the form of the cup. That's the important part. Then we have the pattern, obviously, which is the bit that you notice and you think that's going to be horrendous. But actually the tricky bit is the white, off-white body of the cup. And making sure that we get that to live, okay? Let me show you the reference photo in the wonderful ChromaMagic app, just so I can show you a couple of things that I would be thinking about when I come to simplify something like this, which looks really complicated when you first look at it, at least. So thinking about what I was just saying about the white part of the cup, that's the bit to focus on, right? So in the lights, if I click over here, we can see the lights are almost white, slightly orangish white, very slightly, very low chroma, but mostly notice the values. So these are values 1 to 9, which correspond to the values on the Munsell value scale. There it is in the light, okay? And as we move around, gradually we're moving away from the light and the values get lower and lower. So by the time we've reached this point here, we're already 4 steps in value from the light part, more probably than you would guess. And by the time we get over into the shadow here, let's zoom in so we can make sure we get a white bit here. Look at that. That is the color of the cup in the shadow. And that's the bit that we really need to get. Now it actually even gets darker than that, because if we look at the inside, like here we've got about a value 6, that's close to a neutral. But as we go around, remember we're still on the white part of the cup here, and this is the color of that white part of the cup in shadow. That's the bit that will fox you. That's the bit that will surprise you, and that you're likely to judge mistakenly, if you like. And that's the bit that we really need to get. The other thing that we really need to get is we want to make sure that our highlight here is the lightest part of the painting, right? So it looks slightly purplish because, it's from the bluish light coming in from the window, slightly affected as well by the pattern on the cup there. So we need to make sure that this stands out as being very light. But what's handy about this is that this part of the cup is actually in shadow. So as long as I make that value roughly the same as this value, basically about the highest value I can get, because our brains know, looking at the relative values around here, that this part of the cup is in shadow. If I paint that white, it will appear to be brighter than this value here, even though they're the same, because our brains are looking at this part, this white part of the cup, and they're comparing it to this part of the cup, and they're saying that's the same color. You know, we don't think in terms of light and shadow unless we're training ourselves to do that, which obviously is the point of today, to train ourselves to think like painters in terms of light and shadow, to get those values right. So we've got a big value step change from the light part of the white here at a value 9 to over here on the inside of the cup. That's like a value 5 to a 6. So as long as we paint that a white, it is going to stand out and it will work as the light part of the mug, of the little cup, okay? So I will be painting, first we'll do a drawing. We'll rough out where it's going to go. You should be able to see it on the easel now. This is a 7x9 panel. Out on the palette here, I have got 2 blobs of lead white. They're both the same. It's just because I know one is going to get dirty really quickly. And I have a really restricted palette for today. I've only put out what I think I'm going to need. I think this will be enough. I've got ultramarine blue. I've got green, gold, and transparent red oxide to help with the colours in the shadows where we want a little bit more chroma. And then I've got my chroma droppers, raw umber, and ivory black. Okay. But before we do anything else, we need to be thinking about roughly drawing things out. Yes, we've got an ellipse. You know, these things are never particularly easy, you know, to draw out. But I have a kind of a shorthand way of doing this that hopefully will help you. It really is one of those things. I mean, being able to draw ellipses is just about finding a method, and there are plenty of them on YouTube. I've got a video on YouTube about it as well. Different methods of drawing out ellipses and visualizing them correctly. And then it really just comes down to practice. You know, if you are really struggling to get decent ellipses into your paintings, that's your paintings telling you that you need to spend a little bit of time practicing your ellipses. Simple as that, really. So let's start off by, we'll get a bit more light on the easel, actually. There we go. And I'm going to start off by oiling out the panel. So this is just linseed oil with a little bit of, I think this is terps now. I've gone back to terps now. Decided I didn't like Gamsol much. And it didn't seem to make a huge amount of difference to my respiratory passages, whether I use terps or Gamsol. So that's just a really thin layer, which I'm going to make even thinner by wiping back with kitchen roll, because I want the brush to flow. I want the paint to go down easily and spread easily. I want to be able to soften my edges, and the medium helps with that. But I don't want it so slick that the oil is dribbling down the surface. Heather says, surprisingly dark in there. It is indeed. Hello, Jan in Gloucestershire. How strange that there can be people from... There's Liz from Scotland here. I've got Matthew from Illinois. Lots of people from America today. Cato from Sutton Coldfield. And yet... Jan, you're just down the road from me. You should pop over for a cup of tea while we're doing the Friday Live one day. Yes, it is an oiled panel. Yes, we will indeed be painting into an oil layer today. What we're going to do first, let's get a smallish hog out. So I've mixed a little bit of raw umber and white here. Doesn't matter what you use really for drawing out. You can use anything you like. I like raw umber and white because it doesn't interfere with the colours that go in there later. And Elizabeth from Germany, sorry. Nice to see you. Thank you, I'm feeling much better yet. I'm gradually getting there. For anyone who doesn't know, if you weren't here last week, I had a motorbike crash Sunday before last, and basically the whole of my left side is not so bad now, but it has been like one big bruise. I was green laning, what we call green laning in the UK, which is riding ancient tracks. They're legally roads. So usually when I tell someone who isn't aware of that pursuit how I did my siding, they say, oh, you've been tearing up the countryside. And actually, no, we don't. I'm a member of the TRF, and which is as much a conservation organisation as anything else, conserving these old tracks, keeping them open and looking after them. Anyway, I digress. I don't know why I always default to a grid with four divisions like that. Just kind of makes sense to me. So as always, I'm interested in the highest, the lowest point of the cup, at the furthest left and the furthest right. When I have a complex shape like this with ellipses to paint, I always start by finding the left and the right points and then finding the central line. So ignoring the handles, the furthest left point is about here and the furthest right point is about here. So then I want to find halfway between those 2 points, and that gives me the central line, and then everything will be constructed around that. And I'll check that those measurements are pretty accurate. That's about the middle. So the center line is about here. I don't want to have to spend any more time drawing out than necessary, because I want to get in and start painting, which is the fun part. The highest point, the back is about there. The lowest point, about here. So notice I'm making all of these marks on the central line. The front of the cup, the front of the ellipse is about here. So now I can see, like, I've got left, right, highest and lowest points of the ellipse. So it can help you to kind of visualize a horizontal construction line as well. And even if you just do this, you know, find the box, if you like, that your ellipse has to sit within. Just, I don't normally do this, but I'll just so you can see it, I'll roughly draw out the box that the ellipse has to live within. Even just that will help you kind of draw it out. And the way I do it is, like, I like to have each quarter will have 3 lines. So I have a horizontal first, a vertical, which is obviously smaller, and then I'll use just 2 diagonals within that to kind of give me an impression of where the ellipse is going to go. I mean, it's a rough and ready way of doing it, but most of the time it kind of works, and you can just sort of quickly get an impression of whether your ellipse is reasonably symmetrical, which is the main thing that you need. It doesn't matter so much if it's perfectly the same as the one in the reference photo, as long as it's reasonably symmetrical, right? So then we want the sides. Could be something like this, allowing a little bit of room for the base. So I'm thinking about the body of the cup. So then, you know, once I've got something like that mark there, then I can make sure that the other side is symmetrical with that. Make a corresponding mark on the other side, and then I can pretty much guarantee that even if the shape is slightly out, it's going to be at least reasonably symmetrical. Furthest left and furthest right of the handles. And these are also, I mean, they do look really, really complex, the handles, and in a sense they are, but, you know, you don't actually have to paint them exactly. It's more important I feel anyway, it's more important to be able to get the values right than really paint them perfectly. I mean, the reference shot is actually, I realized after I'd taken it, is shot with the subject slightly to the side of the overall shot. So there's even a little bit of perspective distortion in it, which I would largely ignore. That's as much as I would be drawing out, really. Maybe this could be a little bit wider here. And the same on the other side. But drawing things out with like the minimum number of straight lines like that just really helps you get it established. We've got a cast shadow. This is all shadow in the background here. The cast shadow of the cup comes off the side of the panel there and starts obviously from the cup about here. So this is basically all shadow back here. And then we've got the cloth at the front. So the division of light and shadow, it's kind of difficult to see when you've got a complex subject like this, but I know that the light is coming from the right hand side, so I can pretty much say that everything to the left of this line is shadow. Shadow and light. Halftone will be around here. And then inside, it's kind of easier to see, you know, if I squint down, I would say everything to the right of this side is shadow and that's light. But the light here, because this is receding back into the shadow, this is never going to get as light as this part. This is the lightest part of the cup over here, right? And that's as much as I would do. Thomas says, yeah, the handles give us artistic license because of the pic. Yeah, the handles are in shadow. I mean, you can just suggest them. Don't need to get too wound up about it. Hello, Michelle. Good to see you. We have just been... I was thinking of you, actually, when I was just talking about the ellipse. I know you don't like them. I put these things together with ellipses just to challenge you. So for anybody who doesn't know, Michelle Clamp is... a genius, frankly, and she is the developer of the ChromaMagic app, which you can get on the App Store and the Google Play Store. And there is, I think, a link, or at least I've mentioned it anyway, so the name is there in the description. Hello, Sylvie from Montreal. Nice to see you. Sonia from Hawaii, lovely. Haika, it's good to see you. Gillian says, Gillian from Devon, good to see you. They do that round your country lanes. They do. I've done quite a bit of it myself down there. I was supposed to do the Land's End trial, which is like a 20-hour motorcycle trial, which does a lot of green laning as part of it. Last weekend, but I couldn't do it because I'd beat myself up too badly, basically, and I wasn't physically up to it. It's kind of grueling. And there is a fellowship. It's the Trail Riders Fellowship, which I'm a member of. Yes, there are people who go around on off-road bikes, illegal off-road bikes, churning up the countryside, but they are a very small minority. Unfortunately, we all seem to get tarred with the same brush. Speaking of which, let's get a nice big brush out for the background. Juicy big hog flat. Now, around here in the background, we're pretty much as low a value as we can get. We're almost black. We're like value 1 or even lower. Gets a little bit lighter over here, and there's a little bit of light. And then around here, there's maybe a little bit more light again, where you can just about see the cloth. But I'm going to start off with raw umber. Let's get that out of the way, don't need that anymore. With some black in it. The black will help it to cover a little better. I'm going to put a little dab of oil on my brush and then wipe it off. This is where if you have too much oil, it's really going to show, because it won't cover all that well. Try and keep it some kind of impression of where the handle is going to go. So this is just raw umber and black. It's like the darkest value in the painting, really. It's also going to be very dark here, where the cast shadow comes away from the cup. And then it's going to get a little bit lighter, so I'll bring in a little bit more raw umber, tiny bit of white. So make all these values, like for these shadow areas, make them darker than you think you need. I know that if you kind of squint down and if you look carefully, you can see, like, you know, some of the cloth. You can even just about see the pattern in the cloth back there. But it would be a mistake to try and get that in at this point. We're simplifying, so we want that to be as much as possible. We want this to read as kind of one big dark shape. So you see, like, already, if you get these values right and you've gone low enough with these values, already we're starting to get an impression of light and shadow. So for the front here, we're going to be, there'll be some light drop off because the light is coming from the right. So over here it's going to be a bit lighter. We probably want to be up around a value 8-ish. Over on the other side it gets darker. We'll go down to maybe a 5 or a 6. So let's have some white, a little bit of raw umber, just to get us to around a value 8. Now I'd get a fresh brush out for this. I generally get a fresh brush out when I'm changing colour. Now I want this to be slightly lower value because I want this highlight and the light here to show. So that's the right hand side. And then right over on the left hand side, I'm going to go up raw umber and white right down to a value 5, which is going to seem dark. It's going to seem a little bit too dark, but so we still need to keep this clear edge of the cast shadow there, but I'm softening it a little bit as I'm putting this colour on. And then in between them, a colour that's obviously somewhere in between. Not too bothered about perfection of strokes or anything like that at this point. I would rather have that to have a lot of life in it, you know. Cast shadows get softer, the edges get softer the further away you move from the object that casts them. So I've got my cloth brush and I've got my shadow brush, and I can just work this edge, get a nice expressive sweep to it till it starts to feel like shadow. So a little bit harder edge here and softer out there. You can also use soft synthetic flat with no paint on it at all to really soften those edges. Really helps. Soften this one too. And we actually have like quite a bit of darker value coming down here. There's a bit of a shadow down here as well, so I'll just suggest that as well. Just try and make some kind of, using what's there, and make some nice marks at the same time, nice big chunky brush marks. But all the time thinking about making sure that we're getting good values in here. Probably be enough. Sylvie says, ChromaMagic, best investment I've ever made. It really does help. I mean, it helps you, it stops you making like really big value mistakes right at the beginning. It can just help to train your eye a little bit. Like people have been using Photoshop and the posterizing function in Photoshop for a similar purpose for a long time, you know. It just can help. It's a really good way to help train your eye. Yeah, Heather's doing a different size today. Hello, Martin. Good to see you. I am not going to try and say that YouTube handle, but oh, I didn't mean to do that. Sorry, I'm just messing about with my laptop. But many greetings to the painter from Sao Paulo. Sao Paulo, is it Sao? You would say Sao Paulo, right? But yes, I'm working 7 by 9 today. Yeah, Gillian, it's my other side. My evil twin goes out riding motorbikes and crashing them at the weekend. I didn't deliberately crash it. I really didn't want to do it, and I still don't know what happened. Right. Okay. So let's start thinking about. Get these colours out of the way. So we had a little bit more chroma in those because we were using quite a bit of raw umber in them. So I'm going to drop the chroma a little bit by using a mixture of raw umber and white for the body of the cup. And I'm going to roughly paint, not all of it in, but I'm going to roughly paint most of it in. Enough so that I can get an impression of whether I've got the values right, and then we'll start to go in with the pattern, because I want to work both at the same time, because this area here doesn't really make an awful lot of sense for me to paint the body of the cup there, because, you know, you basically, it's so dark there that all you can see is like, you know, mostly pattern. 8 by 10 would certainly work, Francis. You will end up with a very, very slight distortion if you use a grid. But the main difference with this aspect ratio is it's slightly longer, it's slightly wider. You know, so you could just tape off a little bit of it, or you know, obliterate a little bit of the side of the reference photo if you wanted to, and do it that way. It's not hugely different though. Yes, Liz, absolutely true. Values are the workhorses in painting. Very, very true. Okay, so the light part, we're pretty much a value 9. So I'm going to put together what you might have heard called a value string. I'm going to put a little bit of just ivory black in there, because the ivory black is basically a blue, so it's going to drop the value just a tiny, tiny bit. But it's also going to make it slightly cooler because I'm using lead white here. You can use titanium white too. If you're using titanium, you probably want to use a little bit more raw umber in your mixes than I am. So let's say like, we'll mix a little bit of color for various areas. So over the left-hand side of the cup, we were down to like value 4 or 5. But we're going to have a little bit more chroma there, because when you have a really a low, I need some more raw umber, a low chroma local color, which this white is, which means it's very close to gray, to having no hue or chroma to it. Chroma is the intensity of the color. Low chroma is grey, is neutral. High chroma is like very intense colours like the yellow of a lemon or something like that. And when you have a low chroma local colour like this cup, when it goes into shadow, it picks up a little bit of reflected light from the space it's in. And that light has a little bit more chroma. So you will tend to find in indoor light like this. Oh, I've got sunlight coming on my palette. I'm going to have to close the blind. It's been grey all day, but now the sun is coming out. So you will find, like in indoor light, the lights will be slightly lower chroma and a little bit towards slightly bluer, which is where you get this kind of cool lights, warm shadows thing. And the shadows will be slightly closer to almost like a raw umber and white, is it? Depending on the raw umber you use. This is Michael Harding raw umber, which is a nice, really, really useful, slightly yellowish orange. Some raw umbers are basically very green. So on the outside of the cup, that's from the light to the shadow. So then there will be obviously values in between. So I'll mix up like that's a 9 and that's a 4. Just really helps to keep control of your values if you do this before you start. Let's have like about a value 6 as well, just with raw umber and white. That's about a value 6. So that will also do for the inside here. But in that shadow area, the darkest that the white gets, over here, this part where the inside of the cup is in shadow, this is the white, remember, that we're talking about here. It gets all the way down to like a value, almost like a value 3. So mostly raw umber, because it will have more chroma because it's in the shadow. Raw umber and white. If you're using titanium, you might find that you lose a little bit too much chroma. In which case you can add something like a little bit of yellow ochre maybe, or something like that. Just to give it a little bit more chroma. This is where, you know, titanium white gets this kind of reputation of making what people call chalky colours. And what people are talking about there when they say chalky, they basically mean lower chroma than you want. It's also a very opaque paint, so you need much less of it in your mixes. So if you're not very careful, it can throw your values out too. There's a reason so many painters like to use lead white. If you're having sound, the best thing is probably sound issues. The best thing probably to refresh the video. The sound is fine here that I'm putting out. So if you're having problems, it's probably internet connection at your end. I'm guessing, but that's probably what it is. My mic battery is fine. It's funny how it seems to happen for a few people at a time and not for others. I think it's mostly internet connection. Everything looks all right from this side. Don't know why. I wonder if YouTube has changed some stuff about the way it does things just recently. Okay, so I'm going to get a couple of smallish hog bristles, and let's just make some marks where we know that we are going to be able to see what values we need. So all the way around here, like the lightest part, This is our kind of slightly cooler white, if you like. So I'm going to paint all of this in. Not too thickly, because I know I'm going to have to work some of the blue into this as well. But that's basically that. This is the light part. By the time we get around to here, we're into shadow again. And by the time we get around here, we're moving towards shadow. So it's only this bit, really, which is that light. Okay, so I'll keep that aside. And then there's some white that we can see on the inside of the cup here. Now look how dark this is going to look. So I want you to remember how dark that looks going down. That's the inside of the cup, right? And then as I move over to the right, it's going to get darker and darker as we get into the shadow. And by the time we get over here, I kid you not, that is the color of the white on the inside of the cup in shadow. Just to give you something to kind of have something to reference it against. The pattern there is, it's basically black. So if I pick up, I'll put a little bit of ultramarine blue in it, but it's basically black, the pattern here. So if I put some black next to that, then you can hopefully see that is the color of the pattern back there. It's very, very close to the color of the white. You know, you see it and you think, well, if I look closely, I can really see the difference between those two. But actually, in terms of the overall relationships across the whole of the body, of this little cup and across the painting as a whole, it's a tiny difference. So we want like a value 4 for the white around this side. So this would be a little bit lighter, probably. What did I do there? Oh no. What am I doing? That's a value 6 I just put up. So the inside of the cup is slightly lighter than the outside of the cup. That's an important relationship to be able to see. So we're looking at the white part, because the pattern is too busy and too confusing for us to be able to see light and shadow in it. So we've got a value 6 on the inside of the cup here. This is just the white though, remember. We're going to be covering a lot of this with the pattern. And that's the shadow part of the cup, is a value 4 on this side here. So anywhere I can see some white, I'm going to dab in a little bit of this. You can probably use like a 3 or a 4 to do most of this handle around here as well. Basically, you can't really see it. Leave a little bit of light. And as we move around, we go a little bit lighter. So by the time we're about here, we're about a value 6 again. Moving towards the light from the shadow. And then I'll mix a little bit between that value 6 and the next value up. So we get gradually lighter bit by bit as we come round into the light. So I'm painting these as kind of dabs to show you, hopefully, a little bit more clearly what values you want. But obviously they're not discrete colors like this. They actually, you know, you need to blend a little bit between them. By the time we come out to the side here, we're moving back into the shadow. So we're down the values again. So even though around here we've got the rim, that's going to be like a 6. Even though we're not painting very much, we're trying to get an impression of what the values are that we need at each point. Around here I can see some white showing. That's still going to be pretty dark though, all around there. Doing this pretty much by eye now. Around here there's a little bit of white, so we want to be like about a value 6 there. Need another brush. I'm using 3 now, a dark brush, a middle brush and a light brush. Let's just fill all of that in because there's going to be a little bit to paint there. Value 6 for the light part. What we can see of the handle there. So I'm starting to get a feeling of the three-dimensionality of the cup. That's what I'm looking for basically here. A bit of a light bit at the bottom. Goes around to shadow. Just a little, the base there. So that's about a value 5 I'm putting down there, and then I'm immediately go down lower. This is the value 3. Those values look all right to me for the handle at the moment. And now that's in, it's easier to kind of to paint in everything around it a little bit more too. So it's a loose painting, you know, already, but the light is beginning to come and the form is beginning to come. Just trying to make sure we get the right values in the right places. Frederick says, have you ever tried the gambling transparent white? It seems to lighten colours without the chalkiness of straight white. Yeah, chalkiness is a phrase I try not to use, and by straight white I take it you mean titanium. As I was saying earlier on, chalkiness is basically a loss of chroma in higher values. And that coupled with the strong opacity of titanium tends to mean that unless you are good at mixing, it will tend to overpower your mixes, and unless you know how to correct for that loss of chroma in the lights, it will tend to overpower your paintings a little bit. I'm going to soften everything over here because we're basically in shadow, right? The edge handling is a lot of the magic of creating form comes from the edges. You know, I didn't do very much there, but hopefully you can see it really did make a difference, right? But no, gambling transparent white, I haven't. It sounds like it's a lead white alternative. It would be interesting to see what it's like. Beverly says, it's interesting that you are ignoring the pattern. Yeah, so I'm trying to create the form before I think about the pattern. The other advantage of doing it this way is that I can see if I need to affect my values at all. So this is looking too light now over here. This needs to come down. So I'm just going in with straight black now. Pretty much. Bringing down the values of these areas. I'm not at all bothered about those parts being well painted. You know, I just want to suggest them, and that could be fine. But this, I need a darker value here, going with some black. The cast shadow is always darkest when it's closest to the object. So I'm making sure that I'm getting the form before I start messing about with the pattern, right? And the temptation with something like this is to go in with like a semi-panic and think, I've got to, the pattern's the hard bit, and to obsess over it, and to immediately go in and like, no, I've got to know if I can make that pattern work. But I think that would be a mistake, and you're better off creating form and space and light first, and then think about the pattern. So the cup is starting to appear, right? It's on the way. So now at this point I'll start to think about the pattern, because I've got enough in there. If I step right back and I squint down, I can begin to see the cup. I can begin to feel the light. I'm tempted to bring down the value over here somewhat. We've got that nice big fold, and that's compositionally it's quite nice, because it means this just kind of goes off to shadow over there a bit more, and you get this stronger feeling of light here. And I love painting with big loose brush strokes like this. It's like it's a favorite way to paint. Are the values good enough before I move on? Maybe a little bit darker here. You know, so you'll notice I'm not painting any of the detail. You know, all I really need to do is just suggest those handles. It's in shadow anyway, right? So you can hardly see it. If you squint down and you can hardly see it, then you shouldn't be painting it. This is actually too light at the moment. So I need to, maybe if I just drag some of the shadow across it, it will just, yeah, just knock it back a little bit. And this can get knocked back a little bit further too. And I think it takes like a certain amount of confidence in knowing that something will work, even if it's painted really loosely. But as long as you have the values right, you know, you can get away with murder, basically. You don't, what I mean by that is you don't have to paint everything really, really carefully if your values are right. So we're just looking for a kind of an impression of everything today. All right, so we've got like quite a big range of colors for our pattern. Over here on the light side, you know, that's where most of the chroma is. You'll notice if you look at the reference photo, if you look in the light parts, there's a little bit more chroma, but it would be a mistake to just go straight in with our highest chroma blues, because it's nowhere near that high chroma. It is actually blue-gray. Most of the pattern is a kind of a blue-gray. So for this part out here, I would be mixing probably about a value 5 to a 6. But if I get some, let me show you the palette bigger so you can see this more clearly. If I get some ultramarine blue and I mix white with it and I bring it up to about, like say, about a middle value, a value 5. So after about this value, somewhere around this area, 5 to a 6. If I want the color to look realistic, that is too much chroma. The color is too intense. It's nowhere near that intense. And a lot of the problem you find is, apart from obsessing over the pattern too early, what value have I got there? About a 5, a little bit, or a little bit higher. A lot of the problem that you'll find is that the color that you would tend to guess for the pattern would have too much blue in it. So if I want to drop the chroma of that, the best way to do it is to get some black, mix that with white to about the same value. Because black is basically a low chroma blue. So it's a really good choice for dropping the chroma of a blue. And then if I mix between the two, I'll get something which is going to work much better, right? Knock that chroma back. Going to need some more white on the palette as well. But there will still be a little bit more chroma in the light than there is in the shadow, okay? So just to show you, you know, how much I'm knocking that back. I'm not going in with just blue and white. I'm not saying it's wrong to do that. If you wanted to go in with just blue and white, if you really liked that kind of, you know, higher chroma approach to painting, it's not wrong. You know, no one can tell you that what you paint is wrong. You could paint the pattern purple if you wanted. But if you want it to look realistic, you know, depends on what your goal is. If you want it to look realistic, then you're going to want to drop that chroma a little bit. So if I get a small synthetic now, let's think about this in the same way. So there's some pattern out here. Some of it is definitely lower value than this, but I just start. I'm just making some shapes that are vaguely like the shapes on the. I'm not, you know, I'm not trying to paint the actual thing. Some areas are darker, so a bit of blue, a bit of black. So down here, the bottom of the cup here, it starts to move away from the light, so it goes a little bit darker. And try, you can just try and judge it by eye. It takes practice, how much kind of chroma you want to lose from just a straight blue and white mix. As we get round the edge there, we're going into the shadow, so I'm going lower and lower in the values, more blue, more black. So you need to kind of follow, when you're doing a pattern like this, you need to follow the light and the shadow in the same way that we did with the white. But what's interesting, I'll keep that brush for my kind of lighter parts of the pattern. I've already got one out for the darker parts. What's interesting here is the pattern is basically, it's black as near as damn it is to swearing. So I can actually just go in there. I mean, you can't even see any detail there, really. That's the pattern there. There is, just a suggestion of being able to see some white in there. So I'll do that in a second. But in the meantime, this is like just blue and black. I can't even see the edge of the cup there. So you just go right over the edge. You can't really see it until you get around to here. So we'll just obliterate all of that. It's coming already, right? It's the values. It's just getting the values established. So then we start to get a little bit lighter. Black, blue, a little bit of white. Around here, the values starting to come up a little bit. And I'm not going to be putting in all the clouds and the flowers and all of that. I don't care about that. I just want to create an impression of it. And the key to that is the values. By the time we get around here, we're lighter still and a bit more chroma. My chroma's possibly a little bit low there. Because this is light. There's quite a bit of light here. So we get a little bit more chroma, a little bit more blue, and the value goes up. The bit I'm really looking forward to is the highlight. It's pretty much my favorite thing to do on paintings like this of cups with ceramic. I love putting the highlight on. And our brains know that this part here is in semi-shadow. That's not dark enough. Let's go a bit darker there. I'm being careful every time I pick up some blue, I'm adding a little bit of black. So that I'm not, at no point am I going in there with like pure blue. We have a little bit of lower value, one of our lower value whites, because we've got all of our whites mixed here, so I can bring this value down a little bit here. I'm just after an impression, remember. Like you could imagine, like if this was a part of a larger painting. Nod to you, Kathy, for your comment in the community earlier on. Yes, this is very likely. So just finished a workshop, which, funny enough, we did a lot of this kind of painting. And then I'm going to work up to that to make it thin. And the final project is going to be for people who are on that workshop too. This all needs to come down in value. To attempt to, so the workshop was, we painted glass, silver, ceramics like this. Fabric, folds on fabric, and then patterns on the folds. And I just have been to the antique shop and got a load of stuff to put into what's going to be final project, which is a reference photo, which includes an object, one example of everything that we painted. Although the problem I'm having with it at the moment, I put together a few setups and none of them are quite satisfied with me, because for some reason I can get really nice ones, and then when I try and put the silver in, it doesn't really work. So can you see, now you can see the benefit of getting those whites sorted out right at the beginning, you know, because they're established now. I don't have to worry about them. I've got the right values there. Sarah says values rule. They really do. Sarah, I've got to drop you an email. I really want that painting. I was thinking about it today. I've just been so busy just lately, and you know, falling off motorbikes and being ill and getting ear infections and stuff. It kind of got lost a little bit. So dark here, darker. So now I've got a bunch of blues along with my collection of whites, so I can just see where I want lower value. And then we're going to get really, really low in value by the time we get around here. We're back to almost black because we're in the shadow. So I'm not actually painting the pattern, right? But it creates the impression of it because it follows a logic of the values and the chroma. So more chroma in the light and lighter values, and less chroma and darker values in the shadow areas. Actually, my blue is a little bit more greenish blue, probably because it's mixing with the raw umber. But I don't care about the hue at all. What I care about is that I get the impression of light and shadow. If the hue is slightly out, I don't mind. That's not going to hurt my painting. If the values are out, that's going to hurt my painting. So that bit I need to get right. Getting a bit lighter as we come around here. So they're basically just dabs. And trying not to try and paint anything finished, you know, just squint. And then if you wanted to, you could use this technique more carefully and get, you know, quite a close impression of the cup, of the pattern on the cup. But the key to making it work is not the detail. It's not having it really detailed. That's not what makes it live. What makes it live is understanding the color and understanding how color changes from light to shadow and being able to bring that out in your painting. That's what makes it live. Let's try and get a bit of an edge here to help the form. Thanks, Sarah, I will. And we need to organise a way for me to get some money to you as well. PayPal maybe or something. A bit of pattern there. There's just a hint of pattern here. You see it more as like an interruption of the curve of the handle than actual, you know, the colour of the pattern really. How close are we? I think we're getting there. Maybe it needs a little bit of finessing in places. Hopefully I am succeeding in my goal of showing you that you don't need to paint all of the details in order to make something like this work, to give it the impression. I need to do something about the back up here. This is too light in value, making it feel like it wasn't disappearing enough into the shadow. So that's beginning to disappear nicely into the shadow. So let's soften all this area, obliterate this edge. If you soften things and take out detail where it's in shadow, it intensifies the feeling of depth. So I just took this edge out completely and took out any suggestion of detail in there. Need to go lower in value around here. This is not feeling like shadow enough, so I'll bring some black in. That's better. So you need light and shadow of the actual body of the object. You know, in this case, this cup, and the body of it is the light part, the whites. Although to call them whites is like a bit of a misnomer, really, because it's really variations of low chroma browns that appear as whites. But you also need light and shadow in the pattern. And then you will generally find that you'll be able to create something that looks pretty convincing. Even if it's just, you know, kind of impressionist, it's just rough, you know, it's just suggested. Tighten this up a little bit here with the background. Yeah, didn't expect that actually, because ultramarine is a reddish blue anyway, but it still has it's still a little bit more green blue, so I still want lower value here in the cast shadow, lower value here. I was a bit tentative with the values there. Either the paint didn't quite cover well enough, or I didn't quite get what I needed in the values there. That's better. Kind of tempted now it's filled in. I feel like I can bring down the values of the cloth a little bit as well, is going to help it. Just a little bit. Going to help it stand out. I'm not going to put the pattern in on the cloth. Mostly because, you know, for the point of the demonstration, if you're like, oh, I've got some blue in my cloth, that's bad. From what I'm hopefully demonstrating for you today is that it's not necessary to put the pattern in the cloth. It's just a nice colour cloth. But I could easily do like another layer on the painting, if you like, and refine some parts of the pattern a little bit more, and you know. Just trying to get that feeling of it receding into shadow, so the value's a bit light here, so I'm just going to drag down with my... So what I'm mostly looking at when I'm looking at this painting, I'm looking at it from a distance, and I'm thinking about the values more than anything else. The values and the edges now. And this is obviously is a quick painting. If you spent a day over something like this, you could finish it really, really nicely. But hopefully you will agree, it's beginning to get a feeling of light and shadow and form. Just a few little strokes to suggest little bit of detail in the pattern. So now I can play. Now I know I've got the form, now I can play. The problem is, I think, what can happen really easily is that you start to play too early. You get sucked into that pattern and thinking about, yeah, but this bit looks like a tree, so I've got to make that bit look like a tree. No, you don't. What you need to do is to make that bit look like it's going into shadow. And once you've got that, then you can play a little bit with the pattern. So the one thing that we haven't got in there yet Frederick says, I have pieces of my mother's Danish porcelain that got broken in moving. I might try a setup with some of those. Yeah, I think there's something quite poignant about painting broken pottery as well. Especially, you know, I think if something has a personal resonance and relevance to you, paint it for sure. I'll tell you a painter who I think is there's quite a few actually. There's a couple of painters probably worth looking at. So let me give you three painters that I think are really good at doing specifically willow pattern like this and suggesting it. The first is Julian Merrow Smith. I'm sure a lot of you will know his work. Another who's good to look at is Daniel Keyes. Especially interesting if you can find any demos of his with reference photos or with the actual reference there, because you'll see how free he is with the color. Like, you know, he will often use a very greenish blue, change the hue, but it still creates light and shadow, so it doesn't matter. And the other one is Neil Carroll, who also does, like, I think, really beautifully atmospheric little paintings. Jan says, I keep losing the drawing. I know, it's so easy. It's so easy to lose the drawing. Punch my cigarette. What an odd handle that is, but I like it. Says, I just bought ChromaMagic a couple of days ago. It's awesome. It is awesome. By the way, just so you know, I'm always going on about ChromaMagic and I often show it in these demos, but I have absolutely no financial interest in it at all. I just think it's a really, really useful tool, which is why I recommend it. Brushes that we use today are Cornelison's Hogs. Really lovely brushes. Rosemary's brushes I use. Did I use any? Yeah, these are Rosemary's brushes. I think they're called the Botanical set. Nice brushes. And these Winsor & Newton Scepter Gold Series 606 half-inch flats for softening. Ellen says, I'm going to try this. Concentrate on values, chroma, not the details of the pattern. Absolutely, absolutely. And it will work, you know, it will work. We haven't put the highlight on yet. We've got to put the highlight on. It's the fun part. We've got to choose a brush to do that with. Now, this is possibly is a good candidate. This is another Rosemary's brush. It's a 1/4 inch angled eclipse. It's about the right size. It's a little bit worn now, so but I could use that one. I usually would go for flats for something like this. What else have I got that might do it? This is a nasty cheap brush, but it would certainly do. I can't even remember what it is, but it's about the right size. Let's use the nasty cheap brush. Lead white. We've got quite a bit of paint on here so that it covers, you know, so I want to try and get this down in as much as I can in a single stroke. So I want it to go in the right place. The reason for that is I can lay it on top of wet paint, but if I fuss with it, it will start to mix with what's underneath and I'll lose the value. So I want it just to go down, be about the right shape, in about the right place, and be about the right value. I dragged it a little bit at the end. Cutting back into it is not difficult though. Where's my Or do I want to cut back into it with blue, probably? Try and get roughly the right value of blue. See, it went down a little bit too low. And look, pop. Suddenly it's ceramic, right? Suddenly it becomes ceramic. Because your brain knows that there's no way, like that is white in the shadow. Your brain knows that that is the value of white in the shadow. And this is way lighter. So it must be a highlight. Your brain knows. A lot of the time, painting things realistically is thinking about making something read right. I don't care too much about how faithful I am to the reference photo as long as I create the impression. That I want. Bring in a few darker strokes here. The more I bring down the value here, like with a few darker strokes, the more that highlight is going to pop. So this value here, the white here and this value here, almost the same. This is very slightly lighter. I've pushed it a little bit. And this, which looked really, really light at the beginning, is actually not at all, is it? It's really not light. I love painting stuff like this because once you get kind of confident with it, this here I think actually is, I don't think I put any paint on here. I think that's just the panel. Once you can get confident with something like this, it becomes like fun to paint rather than like something that you panic, that brings on a state of panic. Any more highlights? Not really. I think that's about it. I can't see one here. I kind of feel like there should be one there, but I can't see it, so I'm not going to paint it. Maybe slightly lighter here just to show where the front edge of the cup is. And my lips is far from perfect now, but it's good enough. It'll do. So that was about an hour, I think. No pattern was harmed in the making of this painting. At no point did I paint a cloud or a tree or a house, even though they are all there. Now, obviously, it is just an impression of the cup. And you might want to be a lot more careful about how you paint the pattern. But this should show you, hopefully, much more clearly than me just saying it, that basically, if you want something like this to come alive and to live, it's not about painting the pattern exactly. It's not about that. It's about nailing the values and the chromas. Mostly the values. Hello, Jacqueline. Nice to see you. Oh, cool. Beverly says, you had me running around Paris. You didn't have to go to Paris just for transparent red oxide, You can order online. I'm kidding. While on holiday last week, and tomorrow I'm off to a local antiques market near Toronto. Nice, for small items to paint. One day on a Friday live, I'll just show you my collection of stuff. I'll find a way to bring on the phone camera into the stream. I've done it before, I just can't remember how I did it. And show you my enormous collection of stuff. I got some amazing things the other day. I can't show you them yet because or maybe I can show you a couple of them. Do you want to see some of the stuff that I got yesterday from the antiques place? Let me see. We've kind of got where we needed to be with this, right? I've got to move my light. Let me show you these beautiful things. I don't know how well they'll come across on them, just with this light, but they might all right. So I'm currently setting up and will soon be starting the follow-up to the workshop that we just did. Mastering the Magic. So this is going to be more Mastering the Magic. Oh my word, how beautiful is that? Old brass pot with all of that. I mean, the colour, the light just reflects beautifully off this, and it's got all of that lovely kind of patina on it. Couldn't resist that one. Love that very much. Let's show you what else we got. So I mostly got some bigger things. I've got lots of small things, but the idea for this next workshop, ooh, look at that. The idea for the next workshop is we'll be doing 2 or 3 session paintings. Look at all that on there. It's not cheap, this stuff. You know, if you just go to like a thrift shop or something like that, you don't find the really nice stuff. So I'll show you. Pièce de résistance. I found an old French confit pot. This cost me 250 quid and it was worth every penny. Look at it, it's falling apart. And I don't care, you know, it's absolutely beautiful, and you've got 2 different textures to play with on it. Yes, this will be in the workshop. You will be able to paint this gorgeous thing. There's a few more bits and bobs. We're going to do some more copper. So we did a little copper teapot, little copper pot last time. So this time we're up in the game. Imagine this like deep in shadow, coming out of shadow, like with the reflections on the copper, like just like the cup is. Because I know a lot of you here are watching, are waiting for this workshop. So now you've got a good idea of what we're going to be painting. Some of them anyway. And this little cup is also. Maybe my camera is a little bit underexposed. That's probably better. There we go. I hope you enjoyed the session today. Kate says, I've been trying to resist the pull of the next workshop, but these look so good, don't they, though? I spent most of yesterday trawling around the Antiques Emporium, just looking for the most beautiful stuff that I could find. It's also about painting things that are supposed to be slightly tricky, like this pattern on here. And what I'm trying to show you is those things are not quite as tricky as you think. You know, if you, that's why it seems underexposed, because I moved the light. If you can just simplify them down, think in terms of light and shadow, don't think in terms of detail. Don't think in terms of trying to make a perfect replication of the reference photo, and counterintuitively you will probably get much closer than you otherwise would. You don't have to paint all of that stuff. Kathy says I'm weeping here. Yes, you will love that big pot, right? I do like a nice pot. Polished copper, pinkish. It is pinkish, isn't it? But we'll find out exactly what colour that is, Alan, in the workshop, and we will absolutely nail it. So as in the last one, we will be using ChromaMagic to investigate those colours. Basically like a more in-depth version of this. But the difference with the next workshop is that we're going to be doing at least 2 sessions on each painting. So the first workshop, there were mostly single session paintings. I think we're going to have 7 sessions, which allows us to do 2 paintings of 2 sessions each. So a second session on each one, and 1 painting of 3 sessions. So you get a chance to see what you can do with paint, especially with glazing and scumbling, when you start to, really push what you can do to create some really exciting effects with paint, texture and life. So thank you very much for coming, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the session today. Don't forget, in the description of the video, there is a link for you to subscribe to the email list if you want to get notice ahead of time of when these live sessions happen. And if you join the school, you get the reference photo too. Retired Painter says, Paul is now going to have pizza and a glass of wine. You're halfway right. I am going to have a pizza, but I'm not having wine because I'm taking codeine painkillers at the moment, and I don't think that will mix very well with wine. And maybe I should try it and see. Anyway, listen, thank you very much, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the stream today. I'll be back next Friday. Have a lovely weekend, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.